This week, I'm choosing to discuss Durkheim's normative theory of suicide, specifically how egoistic suicide and altruistic suicide relate to one another, and how the media affects suicide rates in regards to its status as a social media or group. Durkheim defines egoistic suicide as a result of a person not being integrated into a social group enough, and therefore feeling insignificant in life. In other words, egoistic suicide occurs when a person either doesn't feel properly involved in a social group, doesn't find a social group at all, or simply doesn't feel like they have a purpose in life because humans derive some of our personal meaning from others. A good example of egoistic suicide risk would be something that unfortunately happens a lot in our schools. Students often bully others for their differences, whether that's religion, politics, or just the way someone looks. For example, I got glasses at a very young age. Some of my peers around me would call me Four Eyes and make fun of me. They would also bully me for my height. I happen to have had very supportive friends and family, so while it bothered me, it didn't cause me enough strife that I wanted to commit suicide. However, if I had been completely ostracized from my peers, if my friends had left my company because of my glasses or my height and joined the bullies, I would have been completely alone and subject to the constant negativity. I would have been at risk for egoistic suicide because I would feel like I no longer had a place in a very important social group in my life, and thus would feel utterly useless and hopeless. Altruistic suicide is both very different and very similar to egoistic suicide. Altruistic suicide occurs because someone derives everything from one social title. Once that title is gone, then the person feels worthless. Going back to the school experience, many students find themselves integrated into one social group or another, whether that's the group is marching band, a sports team, a theater group, or something else. Students who are incredibly passionate about that subject find all of their friends in that world and derive all of their extracurricular pleasure from it would be incredibly socially integrated into that social label. Now, imagine if that student wanted to go to college for their passion, but every college they applied to didn't accept them. Maybe if they were an actor or something similar, they would try to make it on their own, but that failed as well. If that student was no longer able to call themselves an actor, all of their social group was gone, having made other friends or having been successful in that field without that student, the student might be at risk to commit altruistic suicide because they no longer hold the title that made them feel whole. Both types of suicide are held together by the idea that humans derive some or even most of our meaning from our social groups. The theories also thrive on the idea that humans need social groups in order to feel normal. So in regards to the media, considering humans derive meaning from others, it's no wonder that the media shows suicide affects the suicide rates, according to Gunn and Lester in 2012. In her article, Does the Media Matter to Suicide?, examining the social dynamics surrounding media reporting on suicide in a suicide-prone community, Ann S. Mueller cites that there have been a handful of studies that have theorized that the media suggests suicide or teaches people how to die by suicide by showing examples. On top of that, humans tend to find comfort in like-minded groups, and with our increase in social media and gritty television, it's much easier to find these types of groups. So, if people see things like 13 Reasons Why, a show with graphic scenes of rape, suicide, and bullying, and see that it is being praised and celebrated, then it makes sense to me that that would influence their decision, especially in the case of egoistic suicide, where someone feels alone and insignificant. Seeing that type of media and seeing the reaction to that suicide had on their peers could influence them to believe that suicide would be the way to be influential if it was part of their thought process. Egoistic and altruistic suicide theories don't account for the psychological aspect of suicide, such as mental health risk or personal life problems, but they do make a good point for how human beings are affected by group mentality and our social lives, which is kind of the whole point. And with these new types of media, new influences in our lives that weren't around when Durkheim wrote his theory, it's important to note that these new types of social climate and understand how social groups play a role in these types of behaviors.